So by now, I'm guessing we've all seen the video of a man being hit in the face by an officer, and these things go viral. And when they go viral, that means that there's um, a lot of people that has been exposed to the video. So there's there's a lot of talk about it. So I took a look at it, and I admit that there was excessive use of force that was unwarranted, especially by and just on the basis that it was a traffic stop, and it didn't warrant that type of escalation. And you know, like I said, I took a look at it, but what was more interesting was how it was received by celebrities. Like I believe it was a video that I seen first from D.L. Hughley, and D.L. Hughley's um, response to it. It's right here. Let's see. D.L. Hughley. This was the video that I seen. You know, and D.L. Hughley's response was that he called it Trump America, like Trump's America, making it a political thing. So when we start to make things political, things normally have an agenda behind it, And then, I seen that his attorney
We begin tonight in Jacksonville, Florida,
was
where
Ben
a
Crump.
routine traffic stop turned.
And Ben Crump was the same attorney for, in the case of, I believe, George Floyd, and in Trayvon Martin's case. So what I tend to lean on is how they are similar to each other when it comes to civil rights and civil rights violation, when it comes to police misconduct or just any kind of mistreatment, or any kind of in the George Zimmerman case, where laws may be biased, and you may need some sort of civil um, justice. So that's what I'm picking up on this particular case. You see that Ben Crump is his attorney, and it gets a lot of press coverage. So when it comes to police brutality, this is something that it's not a secret. It happens. It happens. People fly off the deep end. Some officers have personal issues, and we want to attribute it to racism. And by attributing certain issues with police brutality to racism, that creates racial tension between police officers and black people. So, that may be the overall goal, and that that's not that's not how you look at certain things. Like, there's racism in itself. You can't believe that racism actually exists. You can have ignorant exists, Um, Stupid people exist, intelligent people exist, but racism, a person not liking you because of your skin or singling you out because of your skin, that's not racism. That's stupidity, at its finest. So what I seen was that D.L. Hughley referenced that traffic stop to driving while black, and that is far from the truth because we have black celebrities and they don't really suffer that type of um, treatment or maltreatment because of their skin complexion. So what I see is that in this case, like again, when there's a lot of media coverage, there's normally agendas behind it. So, being that you wanted to take a look at it and see from you know a perspective of why would they create agendas or an agenda and behind police snatching an unarmed black male out of the car and that being that allowed to be shown on the news and the news giving a lot of attention to it to the point where it goes viral and celebrities talk on it and speak on it. Like maybe I believe that Jamie Foxx also has something to say about it. So again, these things are not um, are not what they actually are. Like I said, I seen the video. He did assault the guy, and he punched the guy in the face, and they they were extremely excessive in their use of force. So I'm not disputing that, but what I'm disputing is that these things have a purpose behind them, and this particular attorney is Ben Crump. So Ben Crump, it's been brought to my attention, is a Freemason. you know so this has some sort of Freemason involvement in it. And even going back to the Trayvon Martin case, Trayvon Martin's father, Tracy Martin, was a Freemason. Not just any Freemason, but a high ranking Freemason. And also George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman's father, was a retired judge and also a master mason himself. So these things have Freemason involvement in it, and even with George Floyd, when you go into the case and you find out that George Floyd was either a Freemason or associated with Freemasonry, and his brother in particular was a Prince Hall Freemason as well. And you wanted to see, like, yo, why is this thing happening? It's because the psychological warfare on a particular people. Because when we're talking about racism, there's not a more racist group in the world than black people. Black people, black people are racist towards other black people. The black people that have are more racist towards black people that don't have. And that's from your honest observation of certain things. And they tend to hide their hand and stay away from black folks that are what you call um, less fortunate, or that don't have the same social and economical capacity that they have. So they are, um, separated from them. So again, like I said, that's just you giving your honest observation. Black people are more racist towards black people than any other group of people, and they are the reason why there's racism towards that group of black people. It's not all black people, it's a certain mentality that they are against, which could be called the hood mentality, the nigger mentality, if you want to say that terminology. But they're adverse towards that. There's the uppity blacks, and then there's the hood blacks, or the ghetto blacks, or the blacks that have been um, exposed to that that type of living. So they're more racist towards blacks than any other group. And again, they are the reason why other groups are um, or feel indifferent towards those blacks, but not all blacks. Like I said, that these things don't pertain to Oprah Winfrey. They don't pertain to high level blacks, and that's just what it is. So you wanted to share that, you know, and like again, it's no secret. Benjamin Crump wins NAACP award by numbers. Freemasons exposed. I guess this is a video that somebody made pertaining to him and his involvement in Freemasonry. So he is actually that. He's actually a Freemason. So we can't undermine that. So when you do click on this video to see what is this guy talking about, or who is this person, what is he talking about, you'll find out that video unavailable. This video is no longer available because the YouTube account associated with this video has been terminated. Go figure. But these things that we see, especially on a viral level, they normally come with some sort of thing attached to it, and I'm not saying that that incident wasn't, it was staged, but yeah, when we're talking about racial tension and police brutality, the overall goal is, to further the whole objective of anti-establishment, anti-authority, and to create social and civil unrest. So you would pit the black people, not all black people, certain black people, against officers, and that would have a domino effect, and it would create all sorts of not just tension with officers, but tensions with pro-American groups or other groups that may be more leaning towards supporting officers or supporting American you want to say the American ways of doing things. So here I seen on Facebook there was um, this particular guy, and I believe that he was someone who had killed an officer because the officer killed his son or something like that. Let's see what Rodney Hitton is. Because I don't really, pay attention to any of this stuff because, like I said, once I was made aware of how they play in the media, I just stopped, paying attention to it. Whose son was shot dead by this Rodney. His son was shot by officers, and I believe that he in return ran over an officer or something like that. And I didn't get into this particular case because, like I said, we don't really take anything that the media dishes as fact, because there's lying for the sake of bringing harmony to people, and then there's lying for the sake of bringing disharmony amongst people. And the media has always been responsible for that. And this isn't something that this isn't a standpoint that you have always had. This is something that was revealed to you as one that sees and one that has the ability to see past certain things, what you want to call like a seer. And you see past certain things. And going back to Facebook, you see this particular situation right here. Just to show you,
Acting under the colored law. Acting under the colored law.
You see, they trying this is what it says up here. They're trying to start a civil war, and that's not that these particular people care. Again, there's people that are supposed to share this stuff, to get to the masses of people and to stir up emotions. These things play on our emotional intelligence So when they do share this type of content, their whole objective is to play on a people's emotional intelligence. So, you know, you had people, blaming political parties for certain things, and blaming this president for it or that president for it. Like when I was in Philadelphia, and the whole situation out there, they blamed that on Joe Biden. It was like, this is because of Joe Biden. And then you seen D.L. Hughley, who was a Kamala supporter, um, blaming, the officer dragging the young man out of the car on Donald Trump. And it's not that. It's the people. It's the people, and the growing sickness amongst the people. And as long as we are not treating the sickness, these things will continue to progress. They will progress, and they will escalate to something more severe. It's like when there's a cancer in the body and it's growing. If it's not treated at the appropriate time, it will escalate, and it will worsen. So that's what we have with these situations, because we ignore them, and we just go about our daily life without addressing our problems. In the background, those problems are growing, and they're becoming greater than what they actually are, what they should be. And again, we have Freemasonry involvement in our conditions, because you do see that, the attorney is a Freemason. You do see that. You see, Trayvon Martin. When you talk about Trayvon Martin, you have Tracy Martin right here. You have Tracy Martin, and again, Ben Crump was a representative of Tracy Martin in the Trayvon Martin case, and that's just what it is. And in any event, you're not being adverse to who Trayvon Martin is, because you were amongst those that took an interest in the case, and you identified yourself with Trayvon Martin because that he represented any and every young black male that was from another state, that could be in a completely different state, and no one knows you. It could be approached by someone, and it could escalate to a physical altercation, and that altercation could escalate to something else. So you are one that had identified with Trayvon Martin, but at the same time, it's been brought to your attention that these things have certain results that they seek to seek, and so when you do go into his case, you'll see that Ben Crump represented him. Call him a civil rights attorney. So even everything dealing with civil rights has always been about manipulating, the masses of black people in America. So when you do uncover one thing, everything else get uncovered. So you start to unravel so much, or so many cases from from today to all the way dating back to the 1900s, the early 1900s. You start to see, parallels of how a lot of propaganda was promoted and pushed to a people. And to this day, they still keep up with the same tactics of trying to play on the emotional intelligence of a people. So, you know, that's one thing that, you wanted to talk about, being that you've seen the video, you've seen the video, you know. And again, like I'll let y'all know when y'all do see this right here. I told y'all when y'all see this, this deals with Freemasonry. Whenever you see this being seen in any video or on any website, even on YouTube, you'll have a lot of that in people's thumbnails, and that's a telltale sign of their association with Freemasonry, and that goes into what nepotism is. We'll talk about Masonic nepotism, and not just Masonic, but they're the ones that you see it prevalent in that particular group, but it's with so many organizations and groups that it is hard to go unnoticed. But you do see, the that symbol. It's Masonic, but these are Masons, and they've been playing on the emotional intelligence of black people for ages, and these things have to come to an end. Like I said, it's when you lie, you want to lie for just reasons. If you're going to lie, if you're going to tell a lie, but to tell a lie to create disorder and chaos, those things, that's erroneous, and we have to, figure out different methods of, bringing forth change, as opposed to, lies and falsehood and deception as well. But, you wanted to share that, and then I seen this right
Corruption
here.
is not bad. Corruption is only bad if I'm not involved. But if I'm part of that corruption, I defend it. Corruption is not bad.
I seen this
Corruption
earlier.
is only bad if I'm not involved. But if I'm part of that corruption, I defend it.
He said, see, corruption is not bad. If only time corruption is bad is when I'm not in it. But if I'm in that corruption, I defend that corruption. So a lot of people, once they partake in the corruption, they tend to defend the corruption, and that's on every level, political level, religious level, medical level. If the corruption is if you're a part of it, you tend to defend it. When they roll out diseases and that it's an agenda behind it, as long as you were part of it, you can defend it. Like when celebrities take an interest in these diseases, and start to promote the disease. Like you may have celebrities that promoted COVID. They took part in the corruption. It was good because they were in it. From everything from that to now with police brutalities, you have celebrities commenting on it, and because they're in it, they defend it. They defend the right of those acts to deceive the masses, with police brutality. because I was assaulted by police, like literally assaulted on camera in their police department, and I went through the proper means of getting justice, through their channels, and you know, still to this day there has been no public apology or no private apology, not even any kind of acknowledgement, and it was far more severe than what they did to me was far more severe than what they did to him. But that's just what you experience, and their whole objective was because they was under the impression that I was somebody that I'm not. I'm not sure what kind of list they comprised and put me on, but whatever they believe I am not. And one thing about me is I'm not anything to play with, and they seen that. They found that out. Those officers found that out. And I didn't have to physically do anything to them. You know what I mean? I didn't have to do anything to them, but they found that out. And we want to show you the action because they're going to show you it. You know. So all this stuff, it was being recorded by him and by them, but they yeah. So what I'm basically saying is that we we get police brutality to stir racial conflict. And here's an overview of how it is received and what it all constitutes, So here we say police brutality and its contribution to racial conflict. Police brutality is a serious problem with deep historical roots in the United States, and it is disproportionately affects people of color. Instances of police misconduct, particularly the use of excessive force and violence against African Americans and other marginalized communities, have demonstrably fueled racial tensions and conflict across the country. Here's how police brutality contributes to racial conflict. Erosion of trust. Police brutality shatters trust between law enforcement and communities, especially those that are historically marginalized. This erosion of trust can lead to increased tension and hostility towards law enforcement, decreasing cooperation with police investigations, and creating perceptions of injustice and systemic racism. Psychological and emotional trauma. The experience and vicarious exposure to police brutality inflicts significant psychological and emotional distress on individuals and communities, particularly those of color. This trauma can contribute to mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and can be intergenerational, deepening the pain and resentment within communities. Heightened vigilance and fear. Communities targeted by police brutality may experience heightened vigilance and fear, leading to increased stress and a sense of vulnerability. This constant anticipation of discrimination can further erode trust in law enforcement and perpetuate negative interactions. Social unrest and protests. First, you have to understand that, when it comes to protests, here we have the George Floyd protest. I've seen the picture. Let's see what the picture looks like. All this stuff right here. You know. You know. If you can't see it, this is where it's at right here. Let me. You know. You see. You know. But again, social unrest and protests. Incidents of police brutality often act as a catalyst for social unrest and protests as communities demand justice, accountability, and systemic change. These movements, while sometimes met with further police violence, highlight deep-seated frustration within systemic inequalities and a hunger for a more just society. So, being that you want a more just society, you know, this isn't how you actually go about it. You go about a more just society by implementing more just leaders and more just leadership, period. And, you know, ex, expelling unjust leadership and unjust laws and unjust institution, unjust organizations, and all these things you would have to expel and get them from out of the societal makeup of what a nation is established on in order for you to have a more just society, you know. So that's just, you know, what it is. So historical context. The history of policing in the United States is intertwined with racial discrimination, with early forms of policing like slave patrols being established to control enslaved Africans. This historical legacy continues to manifest in racial disparities within the criminal justice system and in the disproportionate impact of police violence on communities of color. Addressing the complex issue of police brutality and its impact on racial conflicts requires a multifaceted approach. This includes accountability, holding officers accountable for misconduct through disciplinary measures, criminal prosecution, and policy reforms is essential to rebuilding trust and demonstrating a commitment to justice. Transparency. It goes again, transparency. Again, all deception must be met with transparency. Increasing transparency in policing practices include data collection on use of force, arrests, and civilian complaints can help identify and address problematic patterns. Community engagement, fostering positive relationships between police and communities through genuine dialogue, community-led initiatives, and partnership can help bridge divides and improve mutual understanding. Policy reforms. Implementing policies that prioritize de-escalation, restrict the use of excessive force, and promote bias-free policing is crucial. Addressing systematic racism. Confronting the root causes of racial inequalities, including economic exploitation, political disenfranchisement, and the psychological impact of systemic racism is fundamental to achieving lasting change. So, by addressing police brutality and working towards a more equitable and just criminal justice system, the United States can begin to heal the wounds of racial division and build a society where all individuals are treated with dignity and respect. So that is police brutality and its contribution to racial conflict. So we do see that it's systemic. For me, I say systematic, you know, but it's systemic racism, and it's systemic ignorance, you know. So first we have to exclude the fact that, there's, racism has always been a factor, when that is a means for a people to feel victimized because of their particular color, and once we do away with that, you will see that people are victimized because of a particular ignorance, and as you tend to work on or not want to say work on that, as you tend to acknowledge that it's ignorance, now you have something to focus your attention on as far as bringing forth change. You can't change who you are. You can't change black. You can't change white. But you can change ignorance. You can change, things happening because of a certain way that people think, or a certain way that a person sees things, as opposed to it being a color thing. Then you would feel, obligated to believe that, that person can't change. That person just don't like me because of my skin color, or no, they don't like you because you, psychologically, you've been painted a picture of, certain things that come along with being, excuse my usage, a nigger or niggers. So once they create the persona of niggers, then you have a certain behavior pattern that comes along with it. So that's why there's the perpetuation of a people being a nigger, so they can keep using that type of perception of you. That goes with even the uppity blacks to socialize with each other and still use that terminology, but they are not in that realm of being what you want to call niggers. So that's why it's an issue with the N word, because it stirs up an emotion in people when it comes to racism. And again, racism is just a form of classism, and if you're of a certain class of blacks, and there's whites or other groups that are in that same class, they see you as their equals. But if you're in a certain lower class, other classes that's above you can see you as someone inferior to them. And once you're inferior to you and to them, they can treat you as such, because they don't have the moral capacity to treat any and everybody equal. So they create a class of black people, and they they attribute certain treatment towards them, as opposed to, that type of treatment happening to, you know, um, high level black people. Oprah Winfrey would never get snatched or dragged out of a car, and Obama and Michelle wouldn't be driving down the road and them getting punched in the face and snatched out of a car, or so that's basically what this video is about. How it's not being received how it should be received. Um, there's you know there's that, but like I said, that video with that young male, that young black male, has went viral, and a lot of people had input about it. They made comments. Some people mocked the situation. They were saying that he's going to get paid, he's going to have a lawsuit, and some saying that he's not going to have a lawsuit, and they was mocking him, saying that he couldn't even cry, or whatever the case is. But I wanted to share that because it it needed to be shared. And this happened on the 19th, and today is the 25th, and I believe that the video or the media coverage happened on the the 20th, maybe, or 22nd or the 23rd, probably a day ago. And like I said, there's a lot of people that have commented on the video and commented on the situation, but they don't offer any kind of resolution other than blaming Donald Trump for certain ways of or certain actions of officers. And that's not what it is. It's not that. It's agendas on top of agendas on top of agendas, and their ultimate goal is social and civil unrest, to bring forth social change, and civil change. So I just felt like sharing that because it needed to be shared. As one that sees certain things, they have an obligation to share what they see, so that you can get a clearer picture of it. But that's just what it is. And it has Freemason involvement in it. You always have to question it. You always have to question it. But I wanted to share that. So, peace.